I remember the day everything changed. It was a typical Wednesday, or at least it started that way. I walked in from work expecting the usual routine, Jess, my wife, in the kitchen, maybe humming along to some pop song on the radio. Instead, when I stepped through the door, the vibe shifted. The air felt thick, almost oppressive. Jess was quiet, her back to me as she chopped vegetables for dinner. The only sound was the knife striking the cutting board, a rhythmic thud that felt out of place. "Hey babe," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "What's cooking?" But she didn't respond. The whole scene felt off, like a scene from a bad movie. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe she was just focused on her work. Jess was always driven, often pouring herself into her projects. But then I noticed the subtle changes in her demeanor over the past few weeks. The late nights, the sudden interest in her phone, how she'd go quiet when I entered the room. It wasn't the first time I had my suspicions. I'd been noticing the signs for a while now, but I chose to ignore them. We'd been married for 5 years, and while we had our ups and downs, I always believed we were solid. Suddenly, though, the foundation felt shaky. The trust I thought we had built was now riddled with cracks. That evening, as I sat on the couch flipping through channels, Jess continued to act strange. I caught a glimpse of her phone. It buzzed on the table, and she shot me a quick glance as if she was guarding it. Too often, I found myself staring at that phone, my gut twisting with a mix of dread and anger. I told myself it was just paranoia, maybe she was texting a friend. Yet deep down, I felt something was off. Then the moment that flipped my world upside down came much sooner than I expected. A few days later, I returned home earlier than usual. As I opened the door, I heard muffled voices coming from our bedroom. My heart raced. Was Jess on a call? I peeked around the corner and froze. There she was, sitting on our bed, laughing and flirting with a guy I recognized from her work. The way she leaned into him, the way her laughter rang out, it cut through me like a knife. Time stood still. I couldn't breathe. I stood there, shock paralyzing my body. Jess saw me first and her laughter faded. Her eyes widened, and for a split second I thought she might jump up and make a run for it. Instead, she sat there, her face a mask of disbelief. The guy, oblivious to my presence, leaned in closer, whispering something into her ear. I felt my heart drop. When the realization hit me, it felt like I was drowning. I was overwhelmed with anger, betrayal, and a sense of disbelief. I cleared my throat loudly, trying to muster my voice. "What the hell is going on here?" Jess jumped up, scrambling to cover her shock. She faced me, and I could see the panic in her eyes. "I can explain," she blurted out, but I didn't want to hear it. I could see the guilt etched on her face. She started weaving her excuses in a frantic bid to save herself. "It's not what it looks like, I swear," she said, her voice rising. But I wasn't having any of it. I could read her like an open book, and as she stood there trying to placate me, I felt a storm of emotions swirling: anger, heartache, and a profound sense of betrayal. "Really? Because it looks exactly like you're cheating on me." I shot back, my voice trembling with rage. Her eyes darted between me and the guy, who had finally realized the weight of the situation. He awkwardly got up, murmuring something about needing to leave. As he slipped out of the room, I felt a new wave of emotions crashing over me: humiliation, rage, and a desperate need for answers. I confronted Jess, demanding the truth. Her explanations flowed like a river, filled with lies and half-truths. She claimed it was just a harmless fling, that she was unhappy, that she'd felt neglected. But her words felt empty, each excuse hollow and insincere. I could see right through them, and it only fueled my anger. "Neglected? Is that why you didn't talk to me? Is that why you lied, Jess?" I could feel the tears stinging my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. The woman I thought I knew had been replaced with someone else entirely. I had trusted her, opened my heart to her, and this was how she repaid me, by sharing her body with another man. That night marked the beginning of a long, painful journey. I could feel myself spiraling into a whirlwind of emotions, caught between the desire for revenge and the need for closure. I didn't know where to turn, but I knew I had to make a choice. I took a deep breath, trying to regain some composure. I'd learned one thing through all of this: I wouldn't let her betrayal define me. I needed to take control of the situation. But what would that look like? I didn't know yet. All I knew was that I wanted revenge. This was the moment I decided to plan my next steps carefully. I would make sure she felt the sting of her actions, but I wanted to do it in a way that would hit hard. As the anger simmered within me, I began to plot my course of action, one that would not only reveal her deception but also show her the consequences of her choices. The journey ahead would be filled with twists and turns, but I was ready to take on whatever came next. I was done being the victim. I would reclaim my power and see to it that Jess understood the weight of her choices. The days following the confrontation were a blur. Jess and I had an uneasy truce, a sort of fragile ceasefire. I could feel the tension in the air, a thick, suffocating fog that lingered in our home. After everything that happened, I wanted to scream at her, throw things, and demand answers to questions I hadn't even fully formed yet. But instead, I chose silence. It felt more powerful to hold my cards close to my chest. As I tried to process the reality of my situation, I found myself obsessing over every detail. I replayed the scene in my head 1,000 times, dissecting her excuses, the way she flinched when I raised my voice, that guilty look in her eyes. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in a bad dream, one where betrayal was a constant companion. Jess continued to stagger through the days, her facade of normalcy cracking under the pressure. She would try to engage me in casual conversation about trivial things, what to make for dinner, when to schedule our next trip, and each time I felt a pang of disgust. How could she act like everything was fine? Did she really think I could just forget what had happened? I wanted to confront her again, but I held back. My goal was to gather evidence, to understand the depth of her betrayal before I made my move. One evening, while Jess was in the shower, I made my way to her phone, the very device that had sparked this downward spiral. I knew it was a breach of trust, but I was desperate for answers. I picked it up, my heart racing as I typed in her passcode, a number I had memorized long ago. The screen lit up, revealing a barrage of messages, frothy flirtations, explicit texts, and vague plans that made my stomach churn. I felt a mix of emotions wash over me, rage, betrayal, and an unexpected sense of vindication. Each text was a dagger, each message a confirmation of the affair. I started taking screenshots, knowing they would be useful for what I had in mind. The conversations were filled with little inside jokes, references to our little secret, and even plans for weekends away. As I read, the rage boiled inside me again, and I felt a surge of determination. I would not let her get away with this. I needed to make her feel the weight of her choices. I began to formulate my plan, piecing together a strategy that would reveal her infidelity to the people she cared about most. I thought about her friends, her family, people who knew us, who would be as shocked as I was. The idea of using this information felt like a form of power, a way to reclaim my dignity and show her the consequences of her actions. That weekend, I decided to put my plan into action. I called a few of Jess's closest friends, inviting them over for an impromptu get-together. Just a little gathering, I told them, masking my true intentions with a calm demeanor. I knew Jess would be surprised, but I wanted her to be unprepared for what was about to unfold. As I set up the living room, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. I wasn't sure how Jess would react. Would she deny everything again? Would she try to manipulate the situation to make herself look like the victim? I braced myself for whatever would come next, knowing that I was about to change the dynamics of our relationship forever. The doorbell rang and I welcomed her friends one by one. They filed in, laughter and chatter filling the room. Jess was still getting ready, oblivious to my little gathering. I couldn't help but smirk at the irony. Here she was, thinking she could just brush things under the rug while I had a front row seat to her downfall. When Jess finally emerged, the look on her face was priceless. She was dressed casually, looking like she was about to head to a coffee shop, not to face an audience of people who would soon learn the truth. Her smile faltered as she took in the scene, and I could see the realization wash over her. "What's going on?" she asked, confusion evident in her tone. "Just a little party," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Thought we could all hang out, catch up." Her friends greeted her, but I could see the unease in their eyes. Jess's facade began to crumble further as the atmosphere shifted. I made small talk, steering the conversation while I waited for the perfect moment to drop the bombshell. After an hour of idle chatter, I knew it was time. I turned to Jess and said, "You know, I was just talking to your friends about how much fun we've all had in the past. Sometimes, though, things change, like say if someone were to betray your trust." Her face paled and I could see the color drain from her cheeks. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "I'm talking about the messages I found, Jess. All those texts, flirty, explicit, planning meetups behind my back. You thought I wouldn't find out." The room fell silent. Her friends exchanged glances, shock etched on their faces as they slowly pieced together what was happening. Jess's expression morphed from confusion to disbelief and finally to anger. "Stop it. You don't know what you're talking about," she shouted, trying to regain control. But the damage was done. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. As her friends began to process what I had revealed, I felt a mix of satisfaction and relief. Jess's lies were laid bare, and I could finally see the reality of her betrayal reflected in the shocked faces of those around us. The weight of my decision hung heavy in the air, but I was ready to face the consequences. Jess's reaction was explosive. She began to cry, pleading with her friends to believe her, to take her side. "It's not true. He's just being dramatic," she cried, but her words fell flat. Her friends, once so supportive, looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and disbelief. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just taking revenge. I was opening a door to the truth, and with it, the potential for closure. Jess's betrayal had changed everything, but now it felt like I was finally starting to reclaim my life. The atmosphere shifted as I watched her unravel, and I knew I had made the right choice. I could finally breathe, knowing that the truth was out there for everyone to see. I had taken my first step toward healing, and the journey ahead was still unwritten. The chaos that ensued was something I had never expected. As Jess's friends turned away from her, seeking answers and comfort, I felt a rush of satisfaction mingled with a strange sense of sorrow. Part of me had wanted to see her pay for what she had done, but watching her break down in front of our friends felt like a double-edged sword. I couldn't deny the impulse to inflict pain, but seeing her like that also brought back memories of the love we once shared. Jess's pleading only grew more desperate as she attempted to regain her footing. "You don't understand. He's twisted everything," she shouted, her voice rising. I never meant for it to go this far. But her friends were no longer buying it. The atmosphere had shifted from shock to sympathy for me. I stood firm, a mixture of anger and sadness coursing through my veins as I watched the reality of her betrayal settle in. I had never wanted to humiliate her like this, but I realized she had stripped away my dignity long before this night. As Jess continued to lash out, one of her closest friends, Sarah, stepped forward. "Jess, this isn't like you. You need to take responsibility for this. You need to be honest, not just with him, but with yourself." Her voice was steady and firm, a beacon of clarity in the emotional storm. At that moment, I realized how fragile Jess's web of lies had become. In an instant, the mask she wore began to slip, revealing the truth beneath. The facade she had maintained was crumbling, and she was starting to see that there was no escape from the consequences of her actions. "I can explain everything, please," Jess cried, turning her gaze to Sarah, her eyes pleading for some kind of rescue. But Sarah shook her head, her expression one of disappointment. "You need to be upfront about this. You owe him that much." As the conversation unfolded, Jess's anger turned into despair and she finally broke. "Okay, fine, I was feeling neglected. I made a mistake." Her voice trembled as tears streamed down her face. "But it didn't mean anything. I never wanted to hurt you." Her admission hung heavy in the room. I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me, flooding me with a mix of sadness and anger. "How could you say it didn't mean anything? You were planning weekends away with him, Jess. That's not a mistake, that's a choice." I fired back, my voice rising as I struggled to contain my emotions. The atmosphere shifted yet again, the tension palpable. Jess's friends seemed at a loss for words, unsure how to navigate the fallout. I could see pity in their eyes, but I didn't need their sympathy. I needed Jess to understand the magnitude of her betrayal. "I thought we were building a life together," I said, my voice lowering to a more sorrowful tone. "You've ripped that apart. You think a simple apology can fix this?" Jess shook her head, her hair falling in disarray around her face. I didn't mean to fall for him. It just happened. I was so lonely and you were always working. The excuse felt like a slap in the face. So you decided that cheating was the answer. You could have talked to me, Jess. Instead, you chose to betray me. I watched as she crumbled under the weight of reality, her friends circling around her, trying to offer comfort while also grappling with the shock of her actions. I could see the shame etched on their faces, a mixture of disbelief and pity that stung like salt in an open wound. After what felt like an eternity of silence, I decided to take a step back. I didn't want to be the villain in this story, even if Jess had written me into that role by betraying my trust. I think it's best if everyone leaves, I said, my voice steady. Jess, I need time to process this, and I don't want to do it with an audience. As the friends began to shuffle out, murmurs of confusion and pity bouncing around the room, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The confrontation had played out in ways I hadn't anticipated. Jess had finally shown her true colors, and the burden of my decision to expose her was beginning to lift. Once the last of her friends had left, the silence in our home was deafening. I turned to Jess, who was still sitting on the couch, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to understand what you've done. I want you to see the damage you've caused, not just to our marriage but to yourself," I replied, feeling a strange sense of liberation. "You can't just sweep this under the rug and expect everything to be okay." She looked up at me, her eyes searching for something, maybe forgiveness, maybe a way out. But I knew I couldn't give her that. "You need to figure out what you want, Jess. You need to decide what kind of person you want to be." I felt a pang of sadness as I looked at her, the woman I had loved so deeply now transformed into someone unrecognizable. The pain of her betrayal curled around my heart, a constant reminder of the trust that had been shattered. The next few days were filled with tension and uncertainty. Jess tried to reach out, attempting to call me and text me, but I kept my distance. I needed time to think, to process everything. Each message I received felt like a desperate attempt to regain control, to shift the blame away from her. I couldn't let her manipulate the situation any further. As I navigated through the aftermath, I began to reflect on my own emotions. The anger still simmered beneath the surface, but I felt a strange sense of clarity as well. I was starting to regain my power, to redefine what I wanted for my future. I spent my days diving into work, focusing on my projects and keeping myself occupied. I also began to lean on my friends, sharing my experiences and the betrayal I had faced. They provided a support system that I hadn't realized I needed, reminding me of my worth and encouraging me to think about my next steps. Each passing day brought me closer to a decision. I knew that I had to confront Jess again, but this time it would be under my terms. I wouldn't allow her to dictate the narrative anymore. I wanted to show her that I was done being the victim. I was ready to take charge of my own story. As the days turned into a week, I felt the weight of my decisions becoming lighter. I started envisioning a future without her, a future where I could rediscover myself, where I could heal from the pain and betrayal. I began to realize that I was ready to move on, and that decision brought me a sense of relief I hadn't felt in a long time. Ultimately, I knew I couldn't stay in a marriage that had been built on deceit and lies. I needed to reclaim my life and forge a new path for myself. I was ready to face Jess one last time and let her know my choice, to take a stand for myself and what I deserved. The next confrontation would be different. I would be calm, collected, and unwavering in my decision. I was reclaiming my narrative, and Jess would have to face the consequences of her actions. I was ready to take that step, and nothing would hold me back. I spent the next few days preparing for the inevitable confrontation with Jess. I needed to approach this meeting with clarity and resolve. I didn't want it to turn into another shouting match filled with tears and manipulations. I had already watched her dance around the truth. This time, I would stand my ground with confidence. I scheduled a time for us to meet at a coffee shop near our home. It felt less confrontational than doing it at our place, where the weight of the past hung heavy in the air. I wanted to keep things neutral, a place where we could both feel a little less vulnerable. I arrived early, my heart racing as I watched the barista brew steaming cups of coffee. I felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. This was the moment I would finally lay everything bare. When Jess walked in, she looked different, disheveled and exhausted, her eyes puffy from crying. It was evident she had been struggling since our last confrontation. She spotted me and approached, her demeanor tentative. "Hey," she said softly, taking a seat across from me. "Hey," I replied, keeping my tone even and steady. I wasn't here to coddle her emotions. I had to stay focused on the conversation that needed to happen. "Thanks for meeting me," she started, her voice shaky. "I've had a lot of time to think about everything." "Good, because so have I said firmly, locking eyes with her. "We need to talk about what happened and where we go from here." She nodded, a semblance of seriousness creeping into her expression. "I know I messed up. I just, I never wanted to hurt you, but I got caught up in my own emotions. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Jess, this isn't just about a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to betray my trust." I felt the anger bubbling beneath the surface again, but I pushed it down. I wanted to keep my composure. "You were planning weekends away with him and texting him while I was at work. That's not a moment of weakness, that's an affair." She looked down, shame washing over her features. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I didn't think about how it would affect you. I was just trying to find something to fill the void." "Filling the void," I echoed incredulously. "You filled it with someone else's arms while pushing me away. You could have talked to me about how you felt instead of running to another man. That's what hurts the most." The hurt in her eyes deepened as she fidgeted with her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I should have. I wish I could take it back. I've been a terrible person." "You're right," I replied bluntly. "But saying sorry isn't enough. We can't just go back to how things were. You shattered my trust, and that's not something that can be easily repaired." I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my chest as I prepared to lay everything on the line. "I've made a decision, Jess. I can't stay in this marriage. I can't live with someone who thinks it's acceptable to betray me like you did. I deserve better than this." Her eyes widened in shock, and I could see the tears beginning to well up again. "Please, don't say that. I'll do anything to fix this. I can change. I'll go to therapy, I'll be better." I shook my head, cutting her off. "It's too late for that. You had your chances. You chose to cheat. No amount of therapy can change the fact that you turned your back on our marriage when I needed you the most." The silence that followed was heavy. I felt the weight of my decision settling over me, a mix of relief and grief. This was the end of an era of love, of trust, of the life we had built together. "I never meant for it to come to this," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought we could work through it. I thought there was still hope." "Hope is built on trust, Jess. You've destroyed that. I can't keep trying to patch things up when all I can see is the betrayal. I'm done. I need to move on." I watched as the realization sank in. She was losing me, and the tears began to flow freely now. "Please don't do this," she begged, her voice breaking. "I can't lose you. You're my everything." "I was your everything until you decided I wasn't worth your fidelity," I replied, my voice steady but strained. "It's time for both of us to face the truth. You've shown me who you are, and I can't love that person anymore." As I said those words, I felt a strange sense of finality wash over me. I had been so consumed by anger and betrayal, but now, as I looked at Jess, I saw the woman I once loved, and it hurt. It hurt to know that she had chosen to lose everything we had built through her selfish decisions. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Jess," I said softly, almost as a parting gift. "But it won't be with me." I stood up, feeling a mixture of strength and sorrow. I turned to leave, but as I reached the door, I heard her voice break once more. "I'm so sorry," she yelled, her voice trembling with desperation. I paused for a moment, absorbing the weight of her apology. "Sorry doesn't mean much when it's too late," I replied, not turning back. I stepped through the door, leaving behind the remnants of our marriage and the memories that would haunt me for years to come. As I walked away, I felt a mix of emotions roiling inside me, grief for what I had lost, anger at her betrayal, but also a sense of liberation. I was free from the chains of betrayal, ready to embrace whatever came next. I had reclaimed my power, and while the road ahead would be difficult, I would not walk it alone. I had spent too long wallowing in the pain of her actions. Now I was ready to forge a new path, one where I could rediscover who I was without her. I was ready to heal, to grow, and to move on from the ashes of our relationship. The journey wouldn't be easy, but I knew I had the strength to make it through. I had learned a valuable lesson through all of this, that true love is built on trust, communication, and respect. I had the power to choose my own happiness, and I would not let anyone, especially not Jess, take that away from me. In the days following my confrontation with Jess, I felt like I was walking through a fog. The reality of our separation began to sink in, and with it came a whirlwind of emotions. Some days I felt liberated, reveling in the newfound freedom that came with shedding the weight of betrayal. Other days I found myself grappling with an overwhelming sense of loss, mourning the love I thought we had built. The initial transition was tough. I found myself going through the motions, waking up, going to work, and returning to an empty home. The silence was deafening, and although I had sought this solitude, it felt heavy and oppressive. I filled my evenings with distractions, working late, catching up with friends, and even taking up a few hobbies I had neglected over the years. I wanted to reclaim the parts of myself that I had lost along the way. One of the things I decided to do was to start exercising more regularly. I found that hitting the gym helped release some of the pent-up frustration and anxiety. I had always enjoyed running, but had let it fade into the background during the last year of our marriage. Now, each mile felt like a step toward reclaiming my identity. During one of my runs, I bumped into an old friend from college, Aaron. We hadn't seen each other in years, but it felt refreshing to reconnect. He was in town visiting family and asked if I wanted to grab dinner. I hesitated but decided to accept the invitation. I needed social interaction, and it was a chance to escape the gloom that had settled over me. As we sat at a local restaurant, catching up on mutual friends and reminiscing about our college days, I felt a sense of normalcy wash over me. "So, what's new with you?" he asked casually, taking a sip of his drink. "Honestly, I just got out of a pretty rough marriage," I admitted, the words spilling out before I could stop myself. It felt good to say it out loud, to voice the stark reality of my situation to someone who understood. Aaron raised an eyebrow, concern etched on his face. "I'm sorry to hear that. What happened?" I took a deep breath, summoning the strength to share my story. "My wife cheated on me. It was a total shock. We were together for years, and I thought we had a solid relationship, but I guess I was wrong." He listened intently, nodding along as I recounted the events leading to our split. When I finished, he offered me a sympathetic smile. "You'll get through this, man. It's tough, but you're strong. You deserve better." His words resonated with me. It was nice to hear someone affirm my worth instead of drowning in the darkness of betrayal. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time since the breakup, I found myself laughing, truly laughing, at old stories and shared memories. As the evening wrapped up, I felt lighter. Aaron suggested we hang out more regularly, and I welcomed the idea. It was comforting to have someone to lean on as I navigated the rocky terrain of my emotions. The weeks passed, and I found a newfound rhythm in my life. I started seeing a therapist to process the emotional fallout from my marriage. I poured out my feelings about betrayal, trust, and heartbreak, and slowly began to work through the pain. It felt cathartic to have someone guide me through the labyrinth of emotions, helping me unravel the threads of hurt and confusion. I focused on rebuilding my life. I took spontaneous trips with friends, learned how to cook new recipes, and even started volunteering at a local shelter. Each new experience brought with it a sense of joy and purpose that I had not felt in a long time. I began to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage, the person I had neglected while trying to maintain a relationship that had ultimately failed. Yet, amidst all this self-discovery, Jess lingered at the edges of my mind. I would sometimes receive texts from her, each one an attempt to rekindle what we had lost. "I miss you," she would say. "I want to talk about us." As much as I wanted to reply, to give in to the nostalgia of what we once had, I reminded myself of the reality I had faced. I couldn't let her words sway me. I had to stay committed to my decision to move on. The hurt ran too deep, and I wasn't ready to revisit the wounds she had inflicted. One particular night, while I was out with Aaron, my phone buzzed with a new message from Jess. I glanced at it but chose to ignore it. Instead, I focused on the laughter and camaraderie around me, feeling grateful for the connections I was building. A few weeks later, as I continued to find my footing, I received a call from Jess. My heart raced at the unfamiliar ringtone. I debated whether to answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello," I said, unsure of what to expect. "Hey," she replied, her voice shaky. "Can we talk? I really need to see you." I paused, taking a deep breath. "What do you want to talk about, Jess?" "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I know I messed up, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I want to fix this," she pleaded. I felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over me, anger, sorrow, and a deep-seated sadness. "Jess, you had your chance. I can't just erase what you did, and I'm not ready to go back to that place. I know that, but I've changed. I've been working on myself. I'm in therapy. I'm sorry for everything." Her desperate tone tugged at my heartstrings, but I had to stay firm. "I appreciate that you're trying to improve yourself, but I can't go back to a relationship built on broken trust. I need to move on." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she spoke again. "You're right, I get it. I just wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry for what I did." "Thank you for saying that," I replied, my voice softening slightly. "But it's too late for us. I need to focus on my own healing now." I hung up the phone feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Jess may have changed, but I realized I had changed even more. I was no longer the man willing to accept betrayal or to forgive without consequence. I was stronger, more resolute, and determined to carve out a future that was authentically mine. As I moved forward, I began to envision a life filled with new experiences and possibilities. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, determined to make the most of this new chapter in my life. I understood that healing was a journey, one filled with peaks and valleys, and I was committed to taking it step by step. I would not let Jess's actions define me. Instead, I would reclaim my narrative and walk confidently into the future I deserved. Despite the emotional turmoil of the past months, I felt a sense of clarity and purpose settling in as I continued my journey of healing. I had made my choice, and there was a newfound strength within me that I had never fully recognized before. It was as if the act of letting go had unlocked a part of me that had been dormant, waiting for the right moment to emerge. As the seasons changed, and the leaves turned vibrant shades of orange and gold, I immersed myself in life with an intensity I hadn't felt in years. I filled my calendar with plans, hikes with friends, volunteering at the local animal shelter, and even joining a community cooking class. Each new experience was a step away from the past, and a step toward rediscovering who I was. The cooking class was a revelation. I had always enjoyed food but had never taken the time to learn how to prepare it. Standing in a kitchen filled with laughter and the aroma of fresh ingredients, I found a sense of belonging. The camaraderie among classmates brought me joy and reminded me that there were still connections to be made, even through the pain. I discovered a talent for creating dishes, and it became a source of pride and creativity, a new way to express myself. One evening, as I prepared a homemade pasta dish that I had perfected in class, I received a message from Aaron. "Hey man, let's get together this weekend. I have an idea." The excitement in his message was infectious, and I quickly agreed. When we met up, he revealed his plan, a camping trip at a nearby lake. "It'll be a great way to unwind and reconnect with nature. Plus, I know how much you love hiking," he said, his enthusiasm palpable. I hadn't been camping in years, but the idea excited me. It felt like a fresh start, an opportunity to escape the remnants of my past and immerse myself in the beauty of the present. As we packed our gear, I felt a sense of liberation washing over me. This was the kind of adventure I had been missing for far too long. The camping trip was everything I needed. Surrounded by towering pine trees and the serene sound of water lapping against the shore, I felt a profound sense of peace envelop me. Each day was filled with hiking, cooking over a fire, and late-night conversations under the stars. I connected with Aaron and discovered new aspects of myself in the process. One night, while stargazing, we found ourselves discussing relationships and personal growth. You know, Aaron said, sometimes the worst experiences lead us to the best versions of ourselves. You've been through hell, but look at you now. You're living your life again. His words struck a chord deep within me. I had spent so long drowning in despair, but now I was emerging stronger and more resilient. I realized that the journey of healing was not just about moving on from Jess. It was about rediscovering my passions, reconnecting with friends, and embracing the possibilities of the future. As I returned from the trip, I felt invigorated. I began to explore new interests, like photography and writing. I wanted to capture the beauty of the world around me and express my thoughts and emotions through words. Each new hobby became a piece of my healing puzzle, a way to channel my experiences into something meaningful. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. I still had moments when the memories of my marriage would creep in, ghosts of the past that threatened to pull me back into the shadows. There were times I would catch myself reminiscing about the good moments, only to be jolted back into reality by the betrayal. But I learned to acknowledge those feelings without letting them consume me. I also started seeing a group of friends who had gone through similar experiences, and together we shared our stories, our struggles, and our victories. It was a safe space where we could be vulnerable and supportive of one another. Through these connections, I realized I wasn't alone. There were others who had faced heartbreak and emerged stronger just as I was. As the months rolled on, I found myself in a place I never thought I would reach: acceptance. I accepted what had happened with Jess, and I accepted who I was becoming. I no longer felt defined by her betrayal. Instead, I was defined by my resilience and my commitment to moving forward. One afternoon, while out for a walk in the park, I ran into Jess. I recognized her instantly, standing a few feet away, her gaze locked on me. My heart raced, but I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. It was as if I had finally stepped into my own light, no longer overshadowed by her choices. "Hey," she said softly, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. "Hey," I replied, my tone measured but cordial. "I've been thinking about you a lot," she admitted, her eyes searching mine. "I know I messed up everything, and I'm truly sorry for how I hurt you." I nodded, acknowledging her words without the weight of anger that once consumed me. "Thank you for saying that, Jess. It took me a long time to process everything, but I've learned a lot about myself since then." She looked down, her expression a mix of regret and longing. "I miss you, you know. I miss what we had." "It's good to hear that you're doing the work to better yourself," I replied, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. "But I've moved on. I'm in a different place now. I wish you the best, truly." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but there was a sense of understanding between us. I had released the burden of anger, and in doing so, I offered her a glimpse of my healing journey. As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. I had finally closed the chapter on our relationship, ready to embrace the next adventure that awaited me. I learned that healing is not linear. It is a winding path filled with ups and downs, twists and turns. It is about rediscovering who you are, finding your voice, and embracing the beautiful complexities of life. Betrayal had shown me my strength, and I was determined to carry that lesson with me as I ventured into the world beyond. I was ready for new beginnings, new opportunities, and whatever else life had in store. The journey ahead was mine to define, and I would walk it with my head held high.